All right, welcome to the Adobe Premiere tutorial. So one of the first things I wanted to show you guys was just a place to potentially get some video footage to work with. Obviously, you can record your own on your phone. Is definitely going to be high enough quality for this project. Someplace that's kind of nice to go is Vimeo.com. So if you don't know Vimeo, it's just like YouTube, but usually a little bit more kind of artistic bent to some of the videos, although that's not necessarily always the case. But they have a Creative Commons section where people will upload videos that, depending on how they upload them, with attribution or with kind of non-commercial use, they'll allow you to download their videos and use them for whatever projects you want. So the ones that you don't need to ask for permission or do anything are the public domain dedication down here. So you can go to browse videos. There's a search section. So if you're looking for something like, say, a time lapse, you can search for that and get a bunch of different options. When you pick out the video, most of the time they'll have this button right here, just like we used on the Shia LaBeouf video. So download it whatever size you want, and then you're free to use those videos. So definitely check this out for some different options. All right, so once we get into Adobe Premiere here, we can just go to New Project, title it something that you will remember. So Video Demo works for me. This stuff you can just leave the way that it is right away. So I already named a project Video Demo, but I'm gonna have a new one. So here we are. So as per usual, you can, so in some of the other programs, you can go to editing is the template we want to look at, and then reset to saved layout. So that will bring everything back to the way that it comes stock with the program, which is what we want. So the first thing we need to do is import some footage or some media of some sort. I'm going to show you my desktop real quick, which again is very messy, so sorry about that. But here I have all the video files that I want to use in a single folder. And so you want to do that, put everything that you're going to use into the same folder, ideally ahead of time, but as I keep adding new footage, if I record something else, just continue to drop it in the same location, because once we import this, it's technically not saving that footage inside this program. It's saving a link to where it can be found on your computer. So if that link changes, so if I use just some things that are on my desktop and then I move them from my desktop into a folder, then when I open up this program again to work on my video, it won't be able to find the video file that it's supposedly linking to. So try and keep all of those files in the same place that you know where they are. But here we go, I'm gonna import some media. So I have these 4 video files that I'm gonna use. So I can just click all of them and open them up. So the first thing I wanna show you is creating sequences. So depending on whatever footage we're using, as soon as we drag and drop that footage into this space, that will set up how large our actual sequence is. So for instance, I have this vertical video that I recorded really quickly on my my phone camera. And as we can see, it's vertical. So if I look at my sequence settings, the frame size is 180 pixels wide and 1920 tall. So if I export this video, it will also stay in this same vertical format, which is usually not what you want. So if I leave it there, and then I go ahead and drop in one of my pieces of Shia LaBeouf footage, which I got a different one, another one this time, I can see that it doesn't fill this whole frame the way that we want it here. So let me go back to before I created my sequence, and I'll drag in this landscape version, and here we can see again it's generally the aspect ratio that we want to see. So let's go just quickly into our sequence settings. We can see the frame size is 1280 pixels wide and 720 tall, which is what we want for this project. That's 720p high definition. And then we can also see the time base here, 30 frames per second. I didn't show you the one from the coffee footage, but it was higher time based than this. So generally you want all of your pieces of footage to match the time base that you're working with. So this could be between like 24 and 60 frames per second usually. So just try and keep that sort of uniform. All right, so now let's work on cutting up this footage a little bit. So in this Shia LaBeouf video that I found, I kind of like this section where he wears the I am not famous anymore bag on his head. So let's just cut that out specifically. So I can move my player head wherever I want to. So I'm going to get as close as I can to this kind of first frame of the video. And then as I mentioned in class, you can use the left and right arrow keys to make sure you get exactly the first frame that you want. So I want the first one that's not kind of faded out like this. So right here looks good to me. And then I can hit C on my keyboard, or I can click this button here, which is the razor tool, to basically cut this piece of footage from these kind of two scenes into just the one that I want. And now I can click on this stuff that was there before, click and just delete that. And now let's go to the end of our footage here. So wherever we want to stop it, which can be up to you, I'm maybe going to go to where we get this zoom in on his back, and that's fine with me before he starts turning around. So again, get as close as you can to whatever last frame that you want. Hit C, click right there, and then I'll hit V to go back to my move or selection tool, click this other piece of footage that I don't want, and just delete that out. So now I have just this one section of the scene. I'm going to click on this and drag it to the very front so that this is the beginning of our video footage. So now let me grab this introductions green screen thing. And again, I'm going to pick just any kind of scene that I like. So maybe to keep the theme of him covering his face, we'll grab this section here. So let's see. So I'm going to go as close as I can to this first frame and then use my arrow keys to actually pick it out. So this is the very first frame where we can see him. So again, I'll hit C to cut out. Hit V so that I can just select different footage now. Click this stuff that we don't want, hit delete, and now I can drag this until it clips into that very first section that we had there. So now let's go to the end of this. So again, get as close as possible, and then I can use my arrow keys to find the exact last frame. Hit C to cut it, V to be able to select, and just delete everything beyond there. So now we have these two pieces of footage. If I hit spacebar, I can watch it play out in real time. And because it's difficult to record the audio from my screen as well as my voice, I'm not going to really talk a whole lot about the audio that's going on here. But as you can see, there's these like waveforms that show you that there is audio going on in this video. And when you're working on your videos, you'll be able to hear the footage obviously as well. But I'm not going to talk a lot about audio manipulation because it's a little bit more straightforward than the video editing. So anyhow, again, we have our footage changing here. So maybe we're going to want to add a transition to this section here. So one of the things I can do is just between these two pieces of footage, I can right click and click add or apply default transitions. Oops, excuse me. I'm gonna need to put this on the same track. So again, right here, apply default transitions. And if we zoom in, which you can just hit Z to open up this zoom button, and then V again to be able to move stuff, we can see this is a cross dissolve. And if we kind of play through here, we see that it just kind of fades from one straight into the other one, which is, kind of a nice subtle transition, which is, generally what you kind of want out of your transitions. I can go up to effect controls and see kind of some of the options that my transition is utilizing. So for one thing I can do is if I want this transition to last longer, I can, here the same way I can click and drag out different, or the lengths of different scenes. So for instance, I can I can make this scene like shorter by clicking it and just dragging it out. I can do the same thing with my transitions. So if I want this dissolve to go over a longer period of time, I can just click and drag out, and now it's a pretty long transition from one to the other. Or again, I can make it shorter if I wanted to do that as well. So it's a kind of a quick, kind of snappy transition as well. I'm going to delete this transition for now, and we're going to try some of the non-default options. So if I go over here to where my footage and stuff is, I can also go to Effects, and then down to Video Transitions, and pick of these kind of huge number of options. So how about a page turn? So I'll click and drag this and drop it over top of that transition. And as we can see, it transitions, kind of like peeling this thing away until we have that. So here there's going to be a few more options. If I click on this page turn thing, I can start the page turn earlier or later. Something to do would be check the sources or show actual sources so we can see what it will actually look like on our screen when we do it. So we could start the page peel earlier, we could end it sooner, which I don't know why you would do that, but there are the options to kind of modify these transitions again. And the duration here, if I want it to last a specific amount of time, I can type in 3 seconds, and that's how long the overall thing will last. So let's see. So yeah, that's again a really long transition, but there are some options for us to change. So yeah, I'm going to go back to just the default transition. We'll leave that there. All right, so next thing I want to show you is kind of track stacking and how the program actually kind of sees the footage and puts things together. So I'm going to go back to my project video demo over here and just grab another piece of footage. So how about we just grab my coffee thing here. So if I drop this on top of the footage that I have before, you can see that there is something going on in the background that we can see from the green screen here, but then the top video, because it's physically, in this case, above the ones we were working on before, that's the one it'll show first. So that works basically the same way as layers in Illustrator and as well in Photoshop. So I'm not saying that I might want to keep this footage, but if I did, I'd probably want to make it smaller. So now we can go actually look at the effect controls. So I'll click on this coffee footage here, and then up at the top here, you might be looking at the source, but you can click Effect Controls, and you should be able to see some different options for what your video footage looks like. So for instance, so anything that has this blue text here, I can change however I want. So I can click and drag on the position. So this moves it left and right. This position, move it up and down. The scale obviously changes the size of this. So maybe we want this thing like, I don't know, again, I don't know why we would want to do this, but this is an option that we have. You can just put this kind of coffee thing next to Shia in our scene here. We can rotate it. We can change the opacity, so if we don't want it to be entirely visible, we could have it somewhat see-through. So let's see. So now I can actually put it on top of him. We should be able to see both of these pieces of footage at the same time. So in this case, it looks kind of goofy, but there are some pretty interesting effects that you can utilize opacity for. So I recommend definitely giving that a try. All right, let's see. So now we can go to, why don't we duplicate this track that we have down here? I'm going to show you a few other things. So I'm going to delete my coffee footage here. So the same way that we can duplicate different things on, again, Photoshop and Illustrator, I'm just going to hold Alt, click and drag this introductions footage that we have here. So basically I just duplicated that one, and we're looking at the one that's on top currently. So something I can do with this. So first off, we're looking at a green screen here. So I'm actually going to try and get rid of that green screen so that we can see through to the footage below. So before I do that, why don't I drag this over here so that the footage that's below it isn't identical to what we're actually looking at here. So I can go to my effects panel again, and I'm just going to search up the Ultra key and click and just drop it right onto this footage that we want to edit. So then again in your, I'll click on the same piece of footage, go to my effect controls, which are already open, and down under my Ultra key, I can click my eyedropper tool, and then go over to my actual footage and just click somewhere in that green background, and that is what it will try and eliminate. So if we just watch this now, we can kind of see there's some like artifacting, still some kind of background tone behind Shia here, which might not be that big of a deal. You know, we might be able to keep that if we wanted to, but if we want to have kind of a cleaner green screen, I'll show you how we can do that. So I will go to either my setting. So right now it's default. I can go to aggressive, and that will get rid of some of it. I think there's probably still a little more of that artifacting in the background. So I can go to my matte cleanup and bump up the contrast. So I'm not sure if how much we'll be able to see it here, but just bumping this up to kind of as high as possible generally without removing anything that you still want to see in your footage is what you're going to want to do. So I think that looks pretty good. And so now we have, again, this green screen section where we just isolated the one thing that we wanted. So something I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag it back to on top of our green screen area. And I'm going to actually move this around a little bit using our effect controls over here. So I'm going to change my position from right in the middle to a little bit to the left. And now I can do the same thing. I'm going to copy this again, drag it up, and move the scale on this one all the way to the right side. So we can go from having just a single Shia in the middle with the green screen, and by removing that green screen background and then changing the position of these different video files, we can kind of have a triple video version of him as well. So now, you know, I liked being able to pull out the green screen so we can see more of him, but maybe I want to put them all in a different scene altogether. So why don't we click and drag all of our video footage so far and just move it up one space so that we can have a bottom track that once we pull out the green background from this piece of video footage, we'll be able to see something else on this first frame. So again, I'm going to grab my Ultra key and apply it to the same video footage, use my eyedropper to grab that green background, and here we can see there's a lot of kind of artifacting going on from this bottom initial video. So again, we're going to go to matte cleanup, bump up the contrast, in the setting, go to aggressive, and that should clean up most of that green screen. There's still maybe a little bit of stuff here, but for the most part, it's looking pretty good. So now in my video demo project, I'm going to grab this kind of time-lapse footage that we have here. And so now if we watch our full thing, it transitions to these three Shias all speaking to us from this rapidly moving beach scene. So it's already getting pretty interesting pretty quickly. So a few other things for you to try would be to go into this effects panel, make sure you delete any of the text that's in this space so you can look through the video effects, and just try some different video effects and kind of see what they can do. A few places to find some cool ones in my mind would be in stylize would be one. So let's grab, say, an emboss and drop it on this center Shia that we have here. And already it's turning into this kind of interesting sort of weird footage. And every effect that you drop onto your footage will have different options that you can change. So if we go again up into effect controls, we can see the direction of the emboss, how deep is it, how much it contrasts, does it blend with the original like video footage at all, or is it just 100% emboss? We can also click this FX option and just get rid of it if we are messing around with it and don't quite like what we've done. So that's something cool you can do. So again, a lot of the stylized ones are pretty interesting, as well as the distort ones. So let's try a wave warp. And on this one, let me put it on a different piece of footage. So we'll leave the emboss just the way that it is. Maybe drop a wave warp on this second one that we made. And you can see it's kind of got this rolling wave form that's generated on top of the footage that we have there. And again, we can go in and change all sorts of options with our wave warp here. So definitely recommend experimenting with a bunch of the different effect controls. All right, so now why don't we go ahead and look at keyframing. So I mentioned this in class, but basically anything that has a blue kind of text, highlighted text here, you can obviously, that means you can change it. So for instance, we've already changed the position of this Shia over here. We can change the scale, all that. But we can also do that over time instead of just statically. So let's say we'll take this bottom Shia, which is again the kind of embossed one here. And maybe you want to have him like grow over time. So let's go to the beginning of this footage. So right here. So at the beginning of this, we're going to want him to be the size that he is. So that scale will be 100. And the way we're going to change this over time is by clicking this animation button. So if we click this, now we get in this position this little kind of diamond shape, which is a keyframe. So that indicates how, in this case, how big that piece of footage should be at whatever different time. So if we go ahead, let's just watch this in real time. If we go ahead, 5 seconds or so, and then we click another keyframe. Now, at this keyframe, we can change the scale to, let's say, I don't know, how about that, 172. So over this amount of time, that one is going to grow, and then once it gets to this keyframe, it's going to stop and just kind of stay there. So let's watch this whole thing again. So it starts out small, it grows over time until we get to our second keyframe. It goes past that keyframe, and now it's static, stays that same size. So now we could, for instance, go back the other direction. We could drop this down to like super tiny over a short amount of time, so it'll grow, hit the keyframe where it is maximum size, and then shrink pretty quickly to something smaller. We can highlight and move these keyframes. So if we like it shrinking, but wanted that to take place over a longer amount of time, we could drag this keyframe out. If we wanted to take place over a short amount of time, we could drag it in so that transition is even much quicker. There's a lot of different things we can do with that. So again, you can do that with any other option that has, again, this kind of blue text. So for instance, let's also maybe rotate it. So turn on the animation button. At the first keyframe, it's just going to be static where it is. I can actually click these arrow keys to jump to keyframes that I already have. So if I want this to somehow be uniform or tied into what the scale is doing with my rotation, I can do that. So let's, on this second keyframe, move this up to 1 full rotation. So say 1 times 0 degrees then. And then if I go back, so my footage is growing and rotating at the same pace there. And then when it gets to the end, there's no more rotation, but it goes back to that shrinking using that other keyframe. So what I've done so far all seems kind of silly and goofy, and I think that's fine. I kind of want you to explore some of the options to make pretty strange video footage. But one of the ways you've probably seen this keyframing stuff happen in videos before would be in like slideshows. So I'm going to import, I downloaded this photo of the Alps, which again I dropped in my video files folder so I know where it is. So I'm going to open this. I'm just going to drop it on top of our timeline here. So first I'm going to make it the full scale of the screen, or fill the whole screen. And then at the very beginning of its footage, I'm going to toggle my animation and leave a keyframe there. And then I'm going to, let's see, over a few seconds, I'm going to increase the scale slightly. So in slideshows of photographs, people will do this pretty often just to add a little bit of kind of excitement to otherwise static photos. So here it starts at this smaller size and then kind of slowly zooms in as we continue to watch the footage. So again, this is a way that the keyframing is more commonly used, but it can be used to do all sorts of really interesting effects as well. So let's just watch through that again one more time. Kind of slow pan in on this photo that we have. I'm going to get rid of that. So next I want to show you the final thing, which will be some color correcting. So let's actually go to this, this first section. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Whoops. Grab my player over to here and go from editing into the color option up here. So it's going to give us kind of a different look from what we were seeing before. But what we want to look at is actually all on this side. So the first thing we can do is change the look here where it says none. There's a bunch of different presets that in some cases make the footage look like it was filmed on a different piece of equipment. So these kind of like Kodaks on like old Fuji cameras. So they give them kind of like a weathered film look. You can bump the intensity or lower the intensity. And the difference between these two things is this is the source footage. So this is what it looks like unedited. And then this is what the color corrected version is going to look like. So yeah, I can pick all sorts of different ones that have radically different effects, like LDR, HDRs will bump up the highlights and the shadows, which again we can bump the intensity or lower the intensity and kind of see how that's going to work. We can sharpen the image to make things kind of crisper looking or kind of more blurry looking. We can change the vibrance, so all the colors will get even kind of brighter, more vivid. Saturation will basically do the same thing, or the opposite. We could make it more kind of black and white looking. We could make it kind of sepia toned this way. There are a million different color options that you can use to change this. So definitely play around in here as well to kind of see what you can come up with. So again, we can turn this relatively normal red carpet footage into something like super vibrant using some of these options. I'm not saying this looks super good, but you could definitely use this to affect in however you want the tone of your piece to look, because I feel like this footage looks radically different if it's in black and white versus if it's this kind of super saturated version. So I'm going to go back to editing, and I'll show you. So I'll click this piece of footage that we just color corrected or color edited. Up at my effects controls, I can see that I have a new kind of effect called Lumetri Color, which is all of the stuff that we just did in the color correcting. So we could do the same thing with any other effects. We could turn it off and see what it looked like before, or turn it back on in case we like what we did. So let's just take a look at this kind of super saturated version. And I think that is about it for this video, this very goofy thing that we did. So again, definitely try out a bunch of different options, kind of see what you can do, use some of your own footage, and just have fun and see, again, what you can come up with. So now I can show you how to export videos. So we'll go to File, Export Media. When you do this, you need to make sure that you don't have any of the individual sections selected. Otherwise, it will just try and render a video out of that section by itself. So I'm going to hit my selection tool, hit V, just click off of all of my individual clips, and we should be good to go. So File, Export Media. Here we are. So down here, if we only wanted to render one small section of the video, we can move these left and right just to try and export and see what, again, maybe the first scene of our video looks like here. If that's where I've been editing and I don't want to spend the pretty long time in some cases rendering the full video to be able to see it, I can just look at one small section rendered. But in this case, I want to render the whole thing. The format you want here is H.264 in almost every case. This will make it an MP4 video, which plays on basically every different player, every different sort of source of media. Generally for the preset, you want to go to match source at high bitrate. So by matching the source, it's going to make sure that it has the same output as the sequence settings, meaning it's going to be the same size that we were editing at, the same frames per second, the same length, and all of that. So generally, the preset match source at high bitrate is what you're going to want. I haven't been talking about or really looking at audio, so if I don't even want the audio for this, I can just unclick this, but might as well leave it on. And then here I can change my output name. So whatever you want to title your video, video 1, just click save it, and then go into export, and it will render your video. So that is about that. Let me know if you have any questions, and looking forward to seeing what you come up with.